My husband Victor was gone. We had just come from laying him to rest beneath a Georgia oak, the scent of magnolias still clinging to my black dress. Now I sat in the cold, sterile boardroom of the company I built from dirt and dreams. And my son-in-law, Jason, smiled a predator's smile. Now that the old man is gone, he said, voice like chipping ice, you'll put the company in my wife's name and fend for yourself. I didn't flinch. I smiled back. They thought grief had hollowed me out. What they didn't know was that Victor's final gift wasn't in his will. It was in a secret box. And the lawyer about to walk through that door wasn't just bringing documents. He was bringing DNA results that would burn their paper kingdom to the ground. The silence in the boardroom was heavier than August humidity in Atlanta. We'd come straight from the funeral. The cemetery's somber hush had been replaced by this tight, expectant stillness. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, palms flat on the cool wood. Around me, framed photos of what we'd built. Gleaming towers, steel-spined bridges, community centers pulsing with life, told the story of my work. Vance Construction? Today the name felt like a dare. My gaze kept sliding to the empty leather chair to my right. Victor's chair. For 40 years, he had sat there through every major decision, a quiet compass with a half squint that meant be careful, or a tiny nod that meant trust your gut. The void of his absence was a cold front in an air-conditioned room. I missed that look more than my next breath. Across from me, Jason sat ramrod straight, his hair shellacked, his tie a strangling shade of power red. Beside him, my daughter Marissa stared at the table, shoulders rounded. A woman of 48, who became a nervous girl in the shadow of her husband. And then there was my granddaughter Lila, 21, thumbs flicking beneath the table, bored as if grief were an inconvenience. They weren't here to mourn. They were here to collect. I'd seen it coming. In Victor's final months, their visits had shortened. Their questions shifted from comfort and poetry to accounts and deeds. They saw a dying man as an obstacle and me as an aging gatekeeper. I let the silence drag until it bit them instead of me. Mother, Marissa tried, soft and brittle. Dad would have wanted you to rest. The board is anxious. Jason slid a thick folder across the table, the hiss of paper over polish like a snake's tongue. Transfer documents, he said lightly. You'll sign your controlling shares and the CEO role to Marissa. We'll give Lila a board seat upon graduation. Think of the legacy. Is that what your father would have wanted? I asked my daughter quietly. Jason's smile sharpened. The mask dropped. Now that the old man is gone, he repeated, slow and careful, you will sign the papers, put the company in my wife's name, and stop being a burden. Audacity can be clarifying. There was no anger in me, only a cold, bright certainty. All right, I said, touching the folder without opening it. But first we'll hear from my attorney. Jason's expression flickered. An attorney? This is a private family matter. No, I said, eyes on Victor's empty chair. It never was. 3 days earlier, after the last well-wisher had left and the house had settled into the aching hush of after, I'd stepped into Victor's study, the only room I hadn't faced. It still smelled like him, old books, cedar, a whisper of cologne. Sunlight slanted through dust like a galaxy. Grief makes you clumsy. My knee knocked the desk. A book fell. And there, under the lip of the rug, a floorboard sat a shade proud. I pried it up with protesting nails and lifted out a cedar box the size of a shoebox, heavy as a confession. Inside, a lock of baby hair tied in pale blue ribbon. A yellowed hospital certificate, Samantha Vance Jr., and an envelope, cream paper, my name in Victor's precise hand. My dearest Samantha, my only love. If you are reading this, I am gone and I must give you a terrible gift. I learned the truth he had carried for 48 years. Our infant daughter, Samantha Jr., born with failing lungs, lived only 6 hours. A kind nurse, a desperate young mother in the next room, a switch of records born of a grief so wild it tried to outpace the truth. We brought home Marissa, and Victor, afraid to break me, never told me. He raised her with a father's whole heart, and then, as the cracks in character widened around the man she married, he realized his silence had become our vulnerability. The letter ended not with apology alone, but with a plan. Protect our legacy. Use the truth as a shield. I called David Chen, our friend and lawyer. He mourned with me, then shifted into steel. The letter is our map, he said. Our weapon is science. We'll get legally admissible DNA, quietly. Hospitals keep samples. We'll petition. And I'll hire a PI. We will find your biological daughter. By the time the boardroom door opened, purpose had hardened inside me like cured concrete. David stepped in, immaculate gray suit, weathered briefcase. He took Victor's empty chair by the back, a moment of silent allegiance, then set the case on the table. "Good afternoon," he said evenly. "I'm here as executor of the last will and testament of the late Mr. Victor Vance." Jason tried to wave him off. David didn't so much as blink. He opened a slim blue folder, Victor's favorite color. "This will was executed 6 months ago," he said, letting the date do its work. Then he read the opening, a letter to me, love stitched into law, before his voice cooled. "All personal assets and all shares in Vance Construction, with attendant voting rights, shall transfer in their entirety to my beloved wife, Samantha Vance, and or to my direct bloodline heir, should one be identified." Jason laughed, thin and tinny. "Archaic phrasing. Obviously that means Marissa." "That," David said, sliding on reading glasses, "is precisely what requires clarification." From his briefcase, he produced a sealed envelope from a certified genetics lab. He slid it open with a silver opener. The paper's tear sounded like a verdict. He scanned, then looked over the rims of his glasses. Pursuant to side-by-side analysis of genetic markers from Sample A, identified as Samantha Vance, and Sample B, identified as Marissa Vance, the probability of maternal relation is 0.0%. Silence. Marissa's face blanched to ash. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as if she could rattle the truth loose. Jason exploded, all venom and volume. "Forged! You vicious old—" David let him spit himself empty, then slid the blue folder, Victor's letter, to Marissa. "An explanation," he said softly. "From your father." As Marissa read, her shoulders began to quake, silent sobs cracking a lifetime of certainty. She was no villain in that moment, only a woman whose sky had fallen. Jason kept raging, but his words had lost purchase. David continued, voice steady. "The will is explicit. The primary inheritance flows to the direct bloodline heir. As DNA excludes Ms. Marissa Vance, she is not eligible under this clause." I saw Jason's eyes flicker with quick arithmetic. Trusts, litigation, stall tactics. David cut him off at the knees. "The will further stipulates that if the biological heir can be identified, the entirety transfers to her." He looked toward the door. "And we have identified her." The knob turned. The oak door swung open. A young woman stood there in work boots and a collared shirt with our company logo stitched above the heart. Dust still clung to her cuffs. Her name tag read, Eliza Hayes. She looked from Jason's furious glare to Marissa's crumpled grief, then to me, question wide in her eyes. David's voice carried clear as a bell. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Eliza Hayes, the biological daughter of Samantha and Victor Vance." Shock fell like snow. Jason stared as if she were a ghost come to collect a debt. David laid out the substantiation, the PI's trail from hospital to adoption, the birth mother's diary, the court-verified chain of custody. Locks sliding. Bolts thrown, I pushed back my chair and stood. Not even a glance at Jason. Not at the weeping woman I had called daughter for nearly 5 decades. I walked to Eliza. In the line of her jaw and the bright steadiness of her gaze, I saw Victor. I saw myself. I saw the future. I put my hands on her shoulders. "Hello, daughter," I said, voice shaking with a lifetime of loss and sudden hope. "I've been waiting a very long time for you." That was the spark that burned away the last of Jason's control. He lunged forward with more noise than sense. David had already thumbed the call to security. 2 guards arrived, professional and calm. As they escorted him out, David addressed the room one last time. "There is a final provision." Out of lingering affection, Victor established a modest monthly stipend for Marissa conditional upon counseling, and a legally binding agreement of no contact with Ms. Hayes or Ms. Vance. There is no provision for spouses by marriage in this event. Jason's curses disappeared down the corridor. Marissa didn't move. She clutched the letter like a life preserver in a black sea. When the door clicked shut, the quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was clean. David squeezed my shoulder. "It's done, Samantha. Victor would be proud." He gathered his things and left us, mother and daughter, alone. Eliza spoke first, hesitant. "Ms. Vance, I don't know what to say." "Neither do I admitted, finally letting myself look at her fully. The kindness in her eyes, the steadiness in her stance, a faint echo of Victor's smile. Why don't we start with names? I'm Samantha. We stood at the window overlooking our city, its ribs and skin laid out in steel and glass, so many structures that had risen on the strength of our work. She told me about her adoptive parents, good people now gone. About walking past our sites as a child and feeling an inexplicable pull toward the hum of machines and the smell of cut lumber. When I applied here, she said, wonder in her voice, it didn't feel like getting a job. It felt like coming home. I didn't ask her to call me mother. I asked her to help me build. Eliza, I said, steady. Our legacy isn't money or a name on a door. It's the shelter a safe home gives a family, the bridge that stitches a community back together. I have seen a builder's heart in you since the day you joined my team. Would you like to keep building with me? Her answer was a quiet, ringing yes. For a moment, I thought this was all about justice. But as we looked out on the skyline side by side, an old woman and a young one reflected together in the glass, I understood. It was about forgiveness. Forgiving Victor for carrying an unbearable secret to shield me. Forgiving myself for not seeing the daughter who had been standing right in front of me all along. The legacy was safe, not because of blood alone, but because it had found a heart that would honor it. If you believe true legacy is built on character, not entitlement, you know how this story ends. Not with an inheritance, but with a promise to build what lasts.